Good day, everyone. My name is Shrana Lachman. Today, we are going to discuss about the ethical and legal issues in gerontology. Our group members are Jade Nicholas, Julian Brewster, Hadia Millington, Michelle Hall, Ketiana Barrington, and myself, Shrana Lachman. The first point we are going to discuss is ethical dilemma. The ethical dilemma is a fundamental and frequently encountered challenge in gerontological nursing, defined as a choice between two conflicting courses of action, where either a selection transgresses in a moral principle, often burdening the nurse with a life or death decision when clear policies are lacking and requiring assessment of legal and ethical ramifications. The central conflict is autonomy, which is the client's right to accept or reject all treatments, versus the professional duty of beneficence, which is to do good, which manifests in specific situations like refusal of prescribed medicine or creeping paternalism that violates a patient's self-determination. Other dilemmas include veracity, which is the truth telling, conflicting with family requests to withhold a diagnosis, which is misguided non-maleficence, and clashes between scientific healthcare and the patient's religious personal beliefs. Nurses must resolve these using a framework based on principles like justice and fidelity, guided by ethical theories such as deontology, which is concerned with duty and obligation, or utilitarianism, which is concerned with consequences and the most good, all conducted in an atmosphere of caring, respect, openness, and honesty. Crucially, exemplified by the Mr. MT in the life scenario, the substitute decision maker is legally and ethically mandated to honor the patient's competent express wishes to avoid extraordinary measures, prioritizing the patient's autonomy over conflicting family demands. I will now pass you on to my colleague.
Hello everyone, my name is Jay Nicholas and I'll do ethical theories. The first ethical theory is normative ethics. Normative ethics provides the moral standards or principles that guide our decisions about what we ought to do and why we act in a certain way. It helps nurses determine the rightness or wrongness of their actions in caring for older adults. The anatomy is respecting the older person's right to make decisions about their own care. Beneficence is promoting the well-being of the client, and non-maleficence is avoiding harm. Justice is treating all elderly patients fairly and equally. In a gerontological application, a nurse respecting an older adult's choice to refuse life-prolonging treatment demonstrates anatomy, providing compassionate, end-of-life care guided by principles of beneficence and dignity. For example, when a nurse advocates for patients' rights to make their own healthcare decisions, even when family members disagree, she's applying normative ethics. Second, being meta ethics. This is defined as the means to explore the meaning, origin, and interpretation of moral concepts. It does not prescribe how one should act, but seeks to understand what concepts like good, fair, or ethical mean. It questions the foundations of morality, whether moral values are universal, cultural, or individual. In a gerontological application, in caring for older adults from diverse cultural backgrounds, nurses must reflect on whether ethical principles are objective, which mean universal, or subjective, which is cultural based. For example, in some cultures, family make healthcare decisions for elderly. In others, individual anatomy is prioritized. A nurse might ask, is respecting anatomy always right? Or should family wishes take precedence in certain cultural contexts? This is a meta ethical reflection. The third being applied ethics. Applied ethics is concerned with how ethical principles are used in real world situations. It might apply moral reasoning from normative theories to specific issues in healthcare and nursing. It focuses on addressing ethical dilemmas and decision making in practice. Gerontological application. End-of-life decision, deciding whether to initiate or withdraw life support for an elderly patient. Informed consent and capacity, assessing an older adult's ability to make decisions when cognitive decline is present. Elder abuse and neglect, taking ethical decision ethical action when signing of mistreatment are observed. Resources allocation, ensuring fair access to medical care for older adults in long-term care settings. A nurse using ethical principles to guide the decision on whether to use restraints for a confused elderly patient is practicing applied ethics, balancing safety, which is beneficent, and freedom, which is anatomy. International nursing ethical theories guide nurses in providing care that respects older adults' rights, dignity, and individual values. Normative ethics provide the moral compass. Meta-ethics deepens understanding of what morality means across cultures and contexts. And applied ethics ensures these principles are practiced compassionately and justly in real-life situations. I'll now pass you on to my colleague.
Hi, I am Kitania Barrington, and now I'll be talking on utilitarianism, the idea that moral action are those that produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number, applies to critical and legal effects affecting the elderly. Firstly, we'll be talking about elderly abuse and neglect. From the utilitarian perspective, protecting the elderly from abuse clearly maximizes happiness and reduces suffering. Laws that require reporting of elderly abuse, for instance, promote trust in families and health systems. When vulnerable, members of society feel safe and respected. Overall well-being increased not only for elderly, but for the community as a whole. However, strict enforcement may sometimes interfere with family privacy or lead to false accusations, which can create distress. Utilitarianism might justify such invasion if they serve the greater good, but at what cost to the individual rights? The greatest happiness could sometimes mean sacrificing personal freedom. Secondly, we'll be looking at access to health and resource allocation. During crisis, utilitarianism supports distributing healthcare resources where they produce the most benefit, often saving younger patients who have more potential life years. This can maximize total happiness in society. But this reasoning risks ageism if elderly people are consistently deprioritized, they may feel devalued, causing widespread fear and unhappiness among old citizens. A broad utilitarianism views should consider psychological well-being and social trust, not just survival statistic. 3, end-of-life decision. Allowing assisted dying for the terminally ill elderly patients can reduce extreme suffering and give individuals control over their deaths. Families also benefit emotional and financial, and resources can be directed to other needs, maximizing overall well-being. But legalizing assisted dying can be unintended consequences. Some might feel pressured to end their lives to avoid being a burden. This could create fear among the elderly and reduce societal respect for life. For utilitarians' lens, this widespread distress might outweigh the benefits for few individuals. 4, the age discrimination in employment and services. Promoting elderly equality for elderly individuals in employment and society participation benefits everyone. Society gains from their experience and wisdom, and older people feel valued, leading to increased happiness across generations. However, businesses might argue that hiring younger workers is more efficient or productive in the long term, contributing to economic growth and therefore greater overall utility. Utilitarianism could, in some interpretations, justify exclusion if it benefits the majority. When elderly individuals lose cognitive ability, assigning legal guardians or restricting financial control prevents harm and protects them, which aligns with utilitarians aiming of the minimizing suffering. I will now hand you over to my colleague.
Hi, I'm Julianne Brewster, and I'll be doing creeping paternalism. Some might ask, what is creeping paternalism? It's the gradual process where healthcare providers, caregivers, or family members begin to make decisions for older adults instead of with them, often under the belief that they know what's best. While intentions may be good, it slowly undermines the elderly autonomy, dignity, and the right to self-determination. Within ethical issues, there's respect and dignity. Every older adult deserves respect and the right to participate in their own care decisions. Overprotection can lead to loss of confidence and self-worth. Within ethical issues, there's also a point that is justice. All individuals, regardless of age, deserve fair treatment and equal respect. Creeping paternalism can reflect ageism, assuming elders are incapable simply because they are old. In legal issues, there's a right to inform and consent. Competent elders have a legal right to make informed choices about their care. Making decisions without their consent violates this right. Competency and capacity. Only when a person is legally deemed incompetent can decisions be made on their behalf, example, through a power of its attorney or legal guardian. Otherwise, removing their decisions-making rights is unlawful. Examples: family insists an elder move into a nursing home, as they always say, for their own good, despite objections. Nurse withhold information about treatments risk to avoid upsetting the patient. Caregiver decides what the elder eats or wears without consulting them. Now, we would want to know how to prevent creeping paternalism. We can promote shared decisions. We can promote shared decision-making, involve older adults in all care plans. We can assess ability, not age, base decisions on cognitive function, not assumptions. We can respect the dignity of risk, allow elders to make choices even if some risk is involved. And we advocate for autonomy, protect the person's rights, and reference at all times. Now I pass you on to my other colleague.
Hi, good night. I'm Hadia Millington, and I will be discussing the ethical legal issues within the elderly. I'll first be addressing ageism. So ageism is a prejudice or discrimination against an individual or a group on the basis of age, which is often directed to older adults. So the ethical issue is it violates the principle of the justice and the respect for persons by devaluing or stereotyping the individuals based on a characteristic beyond their control, which is age. So the legal issue is, in many jurisdictions, age discrimination is prohibited by law, particularly in employment, housing, and access to services. Institutional ageism, example, policies that ration healthcare by age. This can have a severe legal implication on it. So we'll look at abuse now. Abuse in elders is a single or repeated act. It is also a lack of appropriate action, which occurs with any relationship where there is an expectation of trust, which causes harm or distress to an older adult. So the ethical issue is, it is a profound breach of the ethical principle of non-maleficence, which to do no harm, and the act in the patient's best interest. The legal issue here is abuse is a criminal offense and a civil wrong. Laws generally cover various forms of abuse, such as physical abuse, which is inflicting physical pain or injury, sexual abuse, non-consensual sex contact. We have emotional or psychological abuse, inflicting mental pain, anguish, or distress. So examples, we have verbal threats and intimidation, intimidating the elderly. We have financial and material exploitation, the illegal or improper use of an elder's funds, properties, or assets. We have neglect now. Neglect is a failure, intentional or unintentional, to provide for the basic physical, emotional, or social needs of the older person. The ethical issue is, it is a violation of duty of care, and the ethical principle of this requires a caregiver to actively promote the well-being of the person in their care. A legal issue, neglect can lead to legal liability, especially when a person has a legal or contractual duty of care. For example, professional caregivers or nursing homes. It can range from inadequate provision of food, water, shelter, and to withholding essential medical care and even their medication. So now violence. Violence in the elder care is often considered a severe form of physical or emotional abuse, representing an extreme act or threat of harm to them. The ethical issue, it directly violates the fundamental rights to safety and bodily integrity and breaches the principle of non-maleficence. The legal issue, acts of violence, for example, assault and criminal offenses, and grounds for legal action. The law provides protection against physical harm for all individuals, including the elderly. So we have end of life and advanced care planning. So this is decision making about life-sustaining treatments, which raise profound ethical and legal questions. So the ethical challenge with this is, it must be ethically decided when treatment becomes futile, offers no benefit, and should be withdrawn, balancing the patient's and the family's desire for continued life support. The legal issue with this now is directives, living wills, and healthcare proxies. These documents are the primary legal tools that allow individuals to dictate their future care preferences. For example, do not resuscitate orders, and appoint a legal healthcare agent to make decisions when they can no longer do so. And we have withholding treatment. Legally, a competent patient has the right to refuse any medical treatment, including life support. When a patient lacks capacity, a properly designated agent or guardian makes a decision based on the patient's known wishes or best interests. So we have confidentiality and privacy. The right to control personal information is essential, but it can conflict with the need to protect a vulnerable elder. So the ethical challenge with confidentiality. The caregivers face a dilemma when they suspect an older adult is unsafe at home, but the patient, who is still legally competent, insists on privacy and refuses assistance. The illegal issue is mandatory or disclosed. So legal expectations to privacy rules, legal expectations to privacy rules exist for situations involving abuse, neglect, or serious threat of harm to the patient or others, where the duty to report legally overrides the duty of confidentiality. We have autonomy, capacity, and informed consent. This is perhaps the most central issue, as it governs the right of the older adult to make their own decisions. So the ethical challenge with that, the healthcare professionals and family members often face a dilemma when an older adult makes a decision that is deemed unwise, but they still have the mental capacity to make it. So the principle of the beneficence, which is doing good, may conflict with respecting the individual's autonomy. So the legal issue in decision making. Informed consent. Legally, consent for any treatment must be informed voluntarily and given by a person with the capacity to decide. Age alone does not determine incapacity. So capacity assessment. When cognitive impairment like dementia is present, a formal assessment of decision-making capacity is required. The legal outcome of this assessment determines who makes the decisions, the individual or surrogate. So we have guardianship. If an individual is legally declared incompatible, a court may appoint a guardian to conservator to make decisions for them. This is the most restrictive legal option, and it is often the major infringement on the individual's rights. Thank you. That is it for my part.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bishop, and I'll be discussing deontology in geriatric nursing. Deontology is a moral philosophy where the morality of an action is based on whether the action itself is right or wrong, rather than the consequences of the action. This duty-based ethic, most famously associated with Immanuel Kant judges, based on adherence to a set of rules or universal moral laws, such as prohibitions against lying or stealing. Deontology contrasts with consensualism, which determines the morality of an action by its own. Deontology in gerontological nursing means that the nurse follows moral duties and rules, such as respect of patient's autonomy to do what is right, regardless of the outcome. This ethical framework requires nurses to prioritize a patient's rights and dignity by fulfilling obligations like informed consent, maintaining confidentiality, and providing care based on a professional code of ethics rather than the potential benefits or consequences of action. Deontology versus consequences. In a deontological approach, a nurse must follow a set of rules even if the action may produce a better result. For instance, a nurse will not lie to a patient to make them feel better if lying is considered inherently wrong according to the ethics code. Example, autonomy. Always obtain informed consent from older adults, even if you believe a decision may not be in their best interest. Truth telling. Be honest about diagnosis or treatment plans, even if withholding information may avoid distress. Confidentiality. Uphold priority, even when family members request sensitive information. Legal issues in gerontology. Older adults may face complex legal and ethical challenges due to age-related vulnerabilities, chronic illness, and dependency. Key legal issues: informed consent. Legal requirements to ensure that older adults understand medical procedures, treatments, and risks. Cognitive impairment, for example, dementia, complicates consent. It may require guardianship or power of attorney. 2. Capacity and competence. Determining whether an older person is legally competent to make decisions involves medical, legal, and ethical assessments. 3. Elder abuse or neglect. Legal duty to report physical, emotional, financial, or sexual abuse. These laws protect older adults in healthcare, long-term care, and domestic settings. 4. End-of-life decisions. Advance directives do not resuscitate orders and living wills. Legal recognition of a patient's right to refuse treatment. 5. Guardianship and power of attorney. Legal mechanisms to protect incapacitated elders must balance protection with respect of autonomy and rights. 6. Age discrimination. Laws prohibit discrimination in healthcare, employment, and housing based on age. Discrimination in Employment Act, the ADA. 7. Confidentiality and data protection. Laws such as HIPAA regulate sharing of medical and personal information. Thank you. I'll now pass you over to my colleague.